If there is one thing the incident at Galley House does very well, it's making you feel uncomfortable without needing cheap jump scares. It's the type of game that seems simple at first, but the more you play, the more you realize something is wrong. And if you don't know exactly what you're doing, you will miss important details, make poor decisions, and likely get stuck without understanding why. So, before you start exploring the house thinking you can just wing it, let me show you 10 advanced tips that truly made a difference for me. Things the game doesn't quite explain to you, but which completely change how you play, and most importantly, how you survive what is waiting for you inside. I'm Mary, and the video is about to start. One of the most important things, and something the game practically doesn't hold your hand to explain, is how to truly master the machine's interface, the so-called contraption. At first, it looks like just a confusing puzzle with random buttons, but once you understand the logic behind it, it becomes practically the heart of the game. And honestly, this is where I felt the game really started to click for me. The trick is understanding that nothing there is random. The slider defines the location, the knobs represent who is in the scene, even if they are just somewhat mysterious numbers at the start, and the dial is the exact moment in the timeline. In other words, you aren't just trying combinations, you are reconstructing an event. When I realized that, I stopped spinning everything in desperation and started testing in a much more logical way, almost as if I were truly conducting an investigation. Another thing many people ignore is the subtle feedback the machine gives. Sounds, small visual changes, even the way it reacts before shutting down. All of these are clues. There were several times when I didn't hit the perfect combination, but I could tell I was close, and that helped me adjust just one element instead of starting from scratch. If you pay attention to these details, you save an absurd amount of time and avoid the frustration of blind trial and error. And most importantly, create a method. I started by always choosing the location with the slider first, then testing character combinations on the knobs, and only then refining the time on the dial. When you activate the big switch and the machine finally turns on with that complete scene with voice and image, it gives a great feeling because you know it wasn't luck, it was deduction. And that is exactly where the game shows how intelligent it is. If there is one thing that separates those who just mess around with the game from those who truly begin to understand what is happening, it is the use of organizational tools. At first, I ignored this quite a bit, thinking I could keep everything in my head, but there comes a point where you simply can't anymore. The game starts throwing so much information at you that without organizing, everything becomes chaos. When you start sorting scenes by location, character, or timeline, the game practically changes shape. It's no longer just about watching fragments, it's about connecting patterns. And that was when I realized how intelligent the game is, because it gives you all the pieces, but it only makes sense when you start reorganizing those pieces the right way. Now, the timeline view is, without exaggeration, one of the game's strongest tools. That is where you start to see who doesn't fit, who is left over at a certain moment. Those characters who remain without a clear location at certain times, that isn't the coincidence. Often, that is precisely where you start to notice inconsistencies, lies, or even events that haven't been fully revealed yet. For me, the moment everything turned around was when I stopped just consuming the scenes and started using the timeline as an actual investigation tool. Instead of asking, what happened here, I started thinking, who shouldn't be here? Or who is missing in this moment? And it is in these kinds of details that the game rewards you, because when you discover something like that, it doesn't feel like the game told you, it feels like you figured it out on your own. One thing that completely changed the way I play was paying attention to that unused information number in each scene. At first, I totally ignored it, thinking it was just a technical detail, but it isn't. This number is basically the game telling you in a very subtle way where there is still important stuff hidden. There were several moments where I got stuck, going in circles, revisiting random scenes without getting anywhere. Then I started testing this idea. Instead of following my gut, I went straight to the scenes with the highest numbers. And man, almost always there was some clue, detail, or connection I had completely overlooked. The interesting thing is that this even changes the way you view your progress in the game. Instead of feeling lost, you start treating it like a more strategic investigation. It's almost like following a trail. The higher the number, the hotter that scene is in terms of relevant information. So if you get stuck at any point, don't waste time trying to guess. Take a look at those numbers and prioritize the most loaded scenes. For me, this became practically a golden rule, and honestly, it made the experience much more fluid and less frustrating. You know when you start a mystery game and think you can just relax and listen to the voices? Well, the incident at Galley House doesn't give you that luxury. Here, from the first minute, you need to turn on true detective mode. The professional voice acting and those stylish illustrations aren't there just for atmosphere. They are your survival tool from getting lost among so many characters and suspects. The secret is to pay attention to distinct voices right away. Each actor brought a different cadence, a tone, a way of breathing between sentences. There's that deep, tired voice that seems to carry the world on its shoulders, and another one higher-pitched, nervous, almost clipping its words. When you start cataloging this mentally, the game changes. Suddenly, you aren't just listening to generic dialogue, you are recognizing patterns, and that makes all the difference when the mystery thickens. But the tip doesn't stop at audio. You need to cross-reference all of this with what you are seeing. Observe each character's clothing in the illustrations, their posture, how they hold a glass or avoid eye contact. The expression on their faces in that specific moment might be a clue that the game will never explain directly, but that your intuition will capture if you keep your eyes open. It's like putting together a puzzle where every piece has both sound and image. And here's what I actually do in my first playthroughs. I create temporary nicknames in my head, like the guy in the brown vest with the raspy voice, or the anxious lady in white. Until I find out their real names, these labels help me anchor everyone's identity in my memory. It seems silly, but trust me, when you have 10 characters in the middle of a mess at Galley House, this association of voice, visual, and your own nickname saves your skin. You stop getting confused about who said what and start truly understanding the dynamics between them. And then, yes, you are playing the game at the level it deserves. This one is that tip that seems like overkill at first, but then you realize it's practically mandatory. Build your own timeline outside the game. It could be on paper, in a notepad, in Notion, whatever. The point is simple. You can't rely just on memory when the game starts to get denser. I tried going by feel for a while, and I just got lost. When you start putting together something more organized with approximate times, who was where, and what each character claims they were doing, everything starts to become much clearer. Because that's where the most interesting part comes in, comparing this with what actually happened using the game's timeline. And it is in this cross-referencing that the inconsistencies start to scream in your face. The most curious thing is how the game encourages this without forcing you directly. It gives you the tools, it shows you the scenes, but you are the one who needs to assemble the complete puzzle. And when you put everything on your own timeline, you start to see patterns that would go completely unnoticed just by playing in a looser way. And in the final act, well, there's no way around it. The game gets much heavier in terms of information, and if you don't have that organized foundation, the chance of getting lost is huge. Now, if you have your well-built timeline, it becomes a different experience. You aren't trying to understand what happened anymore, you are confirming your theories, and that completely changes the way you face the ending. The game doesn't want you to just collect clues. It wants you to distrust them. When I started noticing the inconsistencies between reports, everything changed. It felt like I was finally playing the right way. There was a time when two characters described exactly the same event, but with small, different details. Nothing too obvious, you know? But then I stopped and thought, this can't be a coincidence. And it wasn't. It was precisely in that subtle difference that I found one of the most important clues in the case. The most interesting thing is that the game plays a lot with this idea of relative truth. Not everyone is always lying blatantly. Sometimes it's omission, faulty memory, or even an attempt to protect themselves. And that's where your role comes in. Compare versions, question what seems right, and try to understand what is being hidden between the lines. So if I can give you one direct tip, it's this. Don't accept any report as absolute. Whenever two versions don't match up, stop and investigate. Note it mentally, cross-reference the information, and try to see what lies behind it. In many cases, that is exactly where the game hides the most important answers. You know that moment when you discover something bombshell and think, how did I not see this before? In the incident at Galley House, that feeling is the rule, not the exception. The game doesn't give you all the puzzle pieces at once, and that is precisely why you need to break the expectation that you understood everything on the first contact. You watch a scene, think it's just character introduction, but then you discover a hidden name, an unexpected relationship, or a family secret, and suddenly that casual dialogue from the beginning becomes a stab of tension you simply didn't feel before. Let me give you a practical example from my experience. That guy you thought was just being polite in the first act, maybe offering a coffee, when you discover that he is the long-lost brother of another character, or that he is in debt up to his neck, the same sentence changes color completely. The voice, the illustration, the awkward silence after the line, everything gains a new layer that the game was hiding in plain sight from minute one. Without the additional context, you had no way of noticing, and that is the beauty of it. That is what makes Galley House special amidst so many mystery games out there. It doesn't treat you like someone who just needs to press buttons until the credits roll. It respects your intelligence and gives you real reasons to go back. While other titles make you feel like you're wasting time raking through the past, here, iteration is the most rewarding mechanic. Each return is a genuine aha, that feeling of investigation genius that few games manage to provoke without seeming forced. What helped me a lot was don't be in a rush to the end. When you unlock a new fact, take that pause and go back to the first scenes. Press play again and look with the eyes of someone who already knows. You will be surprised by how much the game was telling you from the start, and you didn't even notice. It's in revisiting the past with the key of the present that the truth lives, and that is why I can't stop playing. In a game full of details like this, trying to find specific information manually can turn into a nightmare. And I only realized how useful this was after having already wasted too much time revisiting scene by scene. When you start using the search function intentionally, everything becomes much more direct. Want to investigate a specific character? Type their name. Want to better understand an object or a place that appeared at different times? Put it in a search. In seconds, the game shows you all the related scenes, and that completely changes the rhythm of the investigation. The most interesting part is how this function helps to connect dots you perhaps didn't even remember anymore. Sometimes you search for something simple, and suddenly several scenes scattered across the timeline appear that together reveal a much clearer pattern. It's the kind of thing you would hardly notice just by navigating manually. After I started using this frequently, it became practically a reflex. A question came up, I went straight to the search. And that makes the experience much more fluid because you spend less time looking for information and more time actually analyzing what is happening. In the end, it seems like a small detail, but it makes a giant difference in how you play. One thing I took a while to accept is that using the hint system isn't cheating, it's knowing how to use it the right way. At first, I avoided it completely. I wanted to solve everything on my own, but that ended up just leaving me stuck for too long without need. When I started using the lighter hints, everything made more sense because they don't give away the answer. They just give you that little push, like a reminder of something you already saw or heard and ended up missing. It's almost like organizing your own thoughts, you know? And that maintains that good feeling of still discovering things on your own. Now, the real secret is to hold back your curiosity. You want to keep asking for hint after hint until you solve everything quickly, but then you completely lose the impact of the reveals. I started using them only when I was truly blocked, at that point where I had already tried everything and wasn't getting anywhere. Using the hint system intelligently makes the game much more balanced. You don't get frustrated by being stuck for hours, but you also don't lose that feeling of, I was the one who discovered this. And for a game of this type, that line is everything. If you really want to go deep, there's no way around it. You need to keep well-organized notes. But it's not just about jotting down anything loose. The secret lies in separating them by categories. When I started doing this, the game practically leveled up for me because everything started to become clearer and easier to reference. Dividing by characters, for example, helps much more than it seems. Noting voice, appearance, potential relationships, and even suspicious motivations makes each person stop being just another number and start having a real role in the story. And that weighs heavily when you start cross-referencing information with the timeline and realize that certain attitudes simply don't add up. Another essential part is separating inconsistencies and open questions. That, for me, was the turning point. Instead of just absorbing information, you start to register what doesn't make sense. And it is precisely there that the game reveals itself, because many answers come precisely from those small contradictions that you noted back then and almost forgot. And at the end of the game, especially with the more advanced puzzles and extra content, those who have this type of organization get a big head start. You don't get lost trying to remember a detail. You already have everything mapped out. The feeling is completely different because instead of chasing answers, you start to connect everything with much more confidence, almost as if you were assembling the final solution piece by piece.